Good morning, Year 5. Welcome to Tuesday, the 25th of February. Today we are looking at the geographical features of Paris. Now, I have to say that this is my favourite unit of humanities. Out of all the history and geography we do, I absolutely love this unit as we are going to look at the city of Paris and compare it to the city of London. I'll explain what we're going to look at in a little bit more detail in a couple of moments, but really this unit is absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed teaching it last year to last year's Year 5s, and they really got into it as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy it too. First thing you're going to have to do, if you like, you can write the date in Walt if that's what you like to do. If not, we're going to move on and look at the do now. So here is your knowledge quiz. It is attached as part of your home learning document as always, or you can just simply write in the answers into your book too. So you need to pause the video here and complete the knowledge quiz. Okay, great. So we're now going to go through the answers to the knowledge quiz with your blue pen or your pencil in hand, ready to tick or fix before uploading your work to Seesaw. Okay, number 1. Which of the following are cardinal points? It was south and east. Northwest and southwest are intermediate points. Which biome is in the UK? The deciduous forest. So well done if you got those first two correct. Number 3. The United Kingdom is divided into regions known as countries. Well done. So you have Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England. And last unit, or sorry, that should be from last year, my apologies. Well no, it's from the last unit too, to be fair, because we did discuss the Romans. The Roman laws were called what? The 12 Tables. And number 5, what year were the Olympic Games held? Or first held in ancient Greece? It was 776 BCE. So you need to pause the video here and make sure you've all ticked or fixed your work before uploading to Seesaw after the lesson. Okay, so we're going to get into this really exciting unit comparing two cities. Some of you may have been to France, some of you may have been to Paris. You all live in London, so you're quite aware of what London is like. And now we're going to be able to compare. So in this unit, we are investigating how does living in Paris as a child differ to living in London. So we're going to look, you live as a child in London, so you have your own experiences of London as a child. How will that compare to if you were a child living in Paris? Okay, before we move on, I just want you to pause the video and think, how do you think it will differ or not differ? So what will be the same? What will be different? So just make a mental note in your head. What do you think would be the same for a child in Paris and London, and what would be different? Okay, so just keep those in the back of your mind as we'll come back to it throughout the unit over the next few weeks, and we'll get your own thoughts, whether your thoughts were justified or whether you explored new ideas. Okay, like I said, we are investigating how does living in Paris as a child differ to living in London. And over the next 5 to 6 weeks, we're going to be looking at the geography of Paris and its key facts. So physical and human geography, that's what we're looking at today. We're going to look at school life in Paris and how it compares to school here. We're going to look at cultural sites, so places where tourists go and places of culture. We're going to look at pollution and how pollution affects both cities. And then we're going to look at food and drink and how it is different in England and London to food and drink within Paris and the rest of France. Okay, so that's the overview. That's the idea of this unit. That's what we'll be looking at. Today, like I said, we're looking at physical and human geography within Paris and comparing that to London. So we need to revise what exactly human and physical geography is. So human geography, or human characteristics, describe the people of a place, their language, their religion, their economic activities, their political systems, their population, and how they adapt to the environment. So, some examples. Human-made features is an example of human geography. They are modifications people have made to the land. Okay, so a river would be physical geography because humans do not change rivers. But humans do change things like buildings, bridges, tunnels, tracks, making dams, and changing the land. So anything a human has made within the city, that is an example of human geography. Language is another example of human geography or human characteristic. as it is the way of communicating with words, symbols, signs, or gestures that are used and understood by a group of people. So that is not physical geography, it has nothing to do with the land, it is to do with the human, it's to do with the people of that area. Religion, as we know, is a belief in a god or gods, and the way people express this belief is their life and worship. Again, that is to do with human characteristics and human geography. The political system is how people develop and change the structures of power, authority and government. So every country has a government, and every country might have a different electoral system and how they vote, how they elect people to parliament, how cities are run, how countries are run. But again, that's all to do with human, so that again is human geography. So kind of simple way of thinking about it is human geography is to do with what people have done or are doing. Physical geography is to think about the land and the physical features of the land, like hills, like rivers, and so on. I will go into that again in detail in a moment. Finally, penultimate one is economic activities is another example of a human characteristic. It shows how people make a living in a place, so the businesses that they run, and the jobs that they have, and the places that they live. And finally, population distribution is the pattern of the number of people who live in a place. For example, more people live in cities than in rural areas or the countryside. More people live near bodies of water than in very dry places. So how the population is distributed, how the population settles across cities and countries. Okay, so they're human characteristics or human geography. Think of what humans do. If it refers to what a human does, then that is probably human geography. A lot to take in, but quite important that we have this in the back of our mind. You probably would have covered this last year anyway. We're now going to look at physical geography, as that is quite important as well for the remainder of this lesson. So, physical characteristics would then describe the natural environment of the place. So, the things that humans have not got anything to do with. They include physical features like landforms and bodies of water, so lakes, rivers, hills, mountains, weather and climate, weather, how hot or cold or how wet or dry a place is, and climate, as we learned in our previous unit, the kind of weather a place has over a long period of time. Soil is another example of physical geography. It's the top layer of the earth in which plants can grow. Sand, silt and clay are basic types of soil. And types of soil vary from place to place depending on the climate. Minerals, they are natural substances such as coal, gold, which are found in rock and in the ground. Again, nothing to do with humans, so it's all to do with the physical land. Vegetation is about plant life. Types of vegetation vary from place to place, such as a forest, grassland, tundra and desert. And climate affects the vegetation of a place. So this all links back to a previous unit that we did on physical geography covering climate and biomes. And finally, animal life includes all large and small animals that live on Earth, again separate to humans, so it is physical geography. Anything to do with climates and biomes is physical geography. Soil, minerals and vegetation are within that. Human geography then is to do with what humans do, but physical geography is about the natural environment. Okay, so that is the distinction between the two, and it's something we're going to look at in detail as we go. So, Paris. France is a country in Europe. Okay, most of you know that, some of you may not. France is a country in Europe. Here is France. This is Europe. Here is France. It is a country in Europe. The capital of France is called Paris. Here is Paris. And in Paris and France, they speak French. So France is a city in the continent of Europe. Paris is the capital of France. And in Paris and France, their language is French. Now, I'm going to give you a question with a little bit of a clue. What similarities or differences can you see between London and Paris from the map in terms of location? Now, I want you to think of cardinal points. Okay? Think of cardinal points, north, south, east, west. Think about the difference of where Paris is located in relation to its country and how London is located in relation to its country. Okay, just pause the video and think about that. Yeah, so you can see here London is in the south or even southeast of England, where Paris is in northern France. Okay, that's just one difference. They're quite close to each other, even though they're in different countries, because London is in the south, Paris is in the north. Okay, climate. Is climate physical or human geography? Yes, it is physical geography. It is to do with the natural environment. Now here is a map of the world. here's England, which is London in the south. Here's France, which is Paris in the north. Can you remember from our last unit what type of climate Paris and London would both have if they're in this part of the world? Yeah, well done. Let's find out. So, they have a temperate climate. Okay? If they have a temperate climate, what do you expect the weather to be like? Yeah, so in the summer it doesn't get too hot. In the winter it doesn't get too cold. It rarely goes below freezing for too long, and it rarely would exceed 25 to 30 degrees for too long. Obviously on some days it does, like we've had freezing temperature before half term, and in the summer we can sometimes get quite hot weather. But in general it is not too hot and never too cold either. So in July, London would average 19 degrees and Paris would average 20 degrees. And in December or in the winter, both average at 5 degrees Celsius. So they're very similar in terms of their climate. They both have a temperate climate, and then the weather within their climate is quite similar too. Okay, brief history of Paris. Now we know our history of London, as you did the Romans last year, Londinium, and the Romans coming and settling and building the city. But the city of Paris began in the 3rd century when a tribe called the Parisii built a settlement. Okay, this tribe came to Paris, came to this area of France and built a settlement. They settled. Later the Romans invaded and built a town on the River Seine, and they named the city Lutetia. Okay, so quite similar. The Romans came as well to Paris as they did to London. So we can see that similarities between the two cities in terms of their history is that the Romans both invaded London and Paris and built the city of Londinium, and also had influence in Paris becoming the city that it is today. You can see as well from the buildings and the way the roads are laid out, which we'll look at later and in other lessons, that you can see similarities, quite a lot of similarities between London and Paris. Okay, language. Is language a human or a physical feature of geography? Yes, it is human because it's about what the humans speak in those countries and how they communicate with one another. So language in France, as we know, is French. If you want to pause the video here, you may, and have a look at some of the different phrases in French that you might like to practice. Okay, we're going to look at some physical features now as well. So here's a map, basically taken off Google Maps, of both cities. What physical features can you see in both cities? So here we have London, here we have Paris. Can you name one physical feature that you can see based on this map? Yeah, well, I can see a river. I can see the River Thames here and how it loops, and I can see the River Seine here as well. So there's a physical feature that they have in common. Okay, Paris, a physical feature of Paris is the 2 islands. Paris is located on the River Seine and has 2 islands. They are natural. These islands are natural. If they're natural, they are a physical feature. They are named Ile de Cite and Ile Saint-Louis. They are connected by bridges. So these 2 islands within Paris are in the middle of the city, and then they're all connected by bridges that are easily accessible. Building of bridges would be human geography because it is something that humans have influenced. Ile de la Cite is in the centre of Paris, and there are 3 medieval buildings: the Notre Dame Cathedral, which we will look at next week, the Concierge Prison, and the Louis Sainte-Chapelle. There's a memorial site there for the 200,000 people who died in World War II, and the memorial is located on the upriver end of the island. Okay, so that's something that unique to Paris, that they have 2 islands within the city connected by bridges. Now London kind of has something similar with the Isle of Dogs and Canary Wharf, but not quite as striking as the one in Paris. Okay, the topography is another physical feature. That's the layout of the land. In Paris it's relatively flat with an elevation of 35 metres above sea level, but it contains a number of hills. So you might remember Marcus Sedgwick was talking about sea level and some places in the east of England and East Anglia being 10 metres below sea level. In Paris, an elevation of 35 metres above sea level. Okay, so not really at risk of flooding, like floodland. But in general, it's generally flat, and people wouldn't have to climb that many hills. London is also quite flat with a number of notable hills. So I know lots of you like to go to Parliament Hill and Hampstead Heath on a walk. I can think of some other hills as well. Let's see, in Camden, there's the Primrose Hill as well. So London is also very flat, but then some notable hills as well, as has Paris. Mount Martre is the highest hill in Paris, and that is where the Sacre-Cœur is, which we'll also be learning about next week. Okay, kind of going off on a tangent here, but just some interesting facts as well. Okay, this is human geography, because we're going to talk about the roads and how roads have been placed in these cities by people. The A86 is in Paris, and it's called the Paris Superpériphérique. So périphérique would come from the word peripheral. So the A86 would go around Paris. Okay, it's a way of people getting around the city without having to go through the city. It's the second ring road around Paris. A ring road is a road in the shape of a ring that circulates a city. It follows an irregular path around Paris with the distance from the city centre, or the Notre Dame, varying from 8 to 16 kilometres, so it helps people get around the city quicker. The M25 would be the ring road that circles London, or encircles London. So it goes around the periphery of London, so people do not always have to go straight through the city where it is very busy. Okay, architecture, that is now a human feature. Paris has 37 bridges, and there are no skyscrapers in the old city of Paris. So, I'm going to ask you in a moment for differences between Paris and London. Here is the city of London. Here is the old city of Paris. Now ignore the background where the skyscrapers are, because that is the new city. Just look at the old city and look at the city of London. What differences can you see? Yeah, so in London I can see a number of skyscrapers. I can see the Gherkin here, I can see the Walkie-Talkie, I can see the Shard. But in Paris, there are not many skyscrapers. Even the Eiffel Tower, even though it's an extremely tall building, would not be considered a skyscraper. So that's the difference between the two cities. Lots and lots of bridges in Paris. I know you can't see them in the picture here. London has the same as you go up the Thames. Okay, population and tourists. The population of Paris is actually much smaller than London. In London, 8.1 million people live in the city, but in Paris only 2.2 million people live there. However, Paris is a much smaller city than London, so it is more densely populated. So London is actually a lot bigger than Paris, and for that reason would have a lot more people living there. Paris is a lot smaller, and has 2.2 million people there, but is more densely populated. That means there is more people for the space that is there. So I'll explain that now using this fact. In London, there are 5,000 people per kilometre square, but in Paris there's 20,000 per kilometre square. So it's 4 times more dense than London. That means it is a lot more busy. There is a lot more people for each space. Tourists are people who visit cities they are not from. London has 19 million tourists per year, and Paris has 12 million tourists per year. Okay, both very popular cities for tourists. That obviously has dropped with the coronavirus, people not being able to come on holidays and visit each city. But on average, that would be the number of tourists that each city would have on a normal year. So, we've come to the Independent. Before I explain the Independent, I just want to show you one thing. I have a video link. This is the video link. I've attached it to your home learning sheet. It gives some extra information to supplement your knowledge to what I said, which will help you in your Independent. So it might be a good idea to have a look at that video before you conduct the Independent. Okay, so I'm going to model it. This sheet is in your home learning, and you may print it off, or you can draw it into your book. It's quite simple and straightforward to draw if you do not have printer. Okay, so we're going to look at the similarities and the differences between London and Paris. Now, we're not just going to say London has this, Paris has that. We're going to make it slightly more challenging by talking about the human geography and the physical geography of both cities. So, in this box, you will be writing a similarity between London and Paris in terms of human geography. In this box, you'll be writing a difference between London and Paris in terms of human geography. In this box, you'll be writing a similarity between London and Paris in terms of physical geography, and in this box, you'll be writing a difference between the two cities in terms of physical geography. Now, I'm going to do one for you. These these fact sheets have also been in your added to your home learning document, so you don't even need to print them off. You can just scroll through the PDF and have a look at them. This is another way of gathering some information. So we're not going to be able to remember everything from the lesson. We'll remember bits and pieces, but this is another way you'll be able to categorize these in terms of physical and human geography and then compare between the two. Now they're double-sided, okay, so there's plenty that you can talk about. Okay, so I have these in front of me. You can't see them on the video, but I do have them in front of me, and I'm going to refer to them as I model my answers. Okay, so just let me get my pen. Okay, human geography. Right, I have the sheet in front of me. I know that religion is human geography, so I'm going to compare the two of those. So for human geography, there's a similarity. Both cities have Christianity as their main religion. Okay, I went to religion in my fact sheet, and there was a similarity, so I wrote it down because I know religion is to do with humans, so that must be human geography. Sticking with human geography, I'm going to look at a difference. Okay, I know that French is the main language in Paris, but if I look at my fact file for London, I see that less than 92% of people speak English as their main language. There's a difference. So despite English being the main language of England, less than 92% of people speak it as their first language of London, in London. So 87% of people in Paris speak French as their first language. But in London, less than 92% of people speak English as their first language. Okay, before I forget, I just want to say you don't have to do 1 point per box, you need to do at least 2. So I'm going to put another dot there to remind me to do another point later. Okay, physical geography. A similarity for physical geography would both have rivers. Okay, the Seine and the Thames. And a difference would be both have a temperate climate, so that's a similarity. But I went to my sheet and I found that Paris actually has more rainy days than London. So both have a temperate climate. But Paris has 160 days of rain in comparison to 106 in London. So 2 points at least per box. Okay, you have the sheets, the fact files to help you. I've modelled one each for you, so you can pause the video and have a look at it.